it seems like when you drive down the streets, when you walk in neighborhoods throughout the county, it seems like to a lot of people that this is a problem that really not only is not going away, but is getting worse every single year. And that frustration is shared by those of us whose day-to-day existence as employees and as volunteers is to reduce that population. The resources now are becoming available, and that's thanks to the generosity, really, of people across Los Angeles County who realize that up to this point, it's been inadequate. The resources have been inadequate to deal with what is a crisis. And that frustration is justified, and as it would be under any circumstances where a social problem seems to be getting worse and nobody seems to be doing much about it.
The most challenging part is seeing that there's so much we can do and not being able to do everything. Kind of having to limit yourself because of resources, because of the funds that you have or don't have.
The current resources that we have now are during the work week, during daytime hours. They're not on the weekend. They're not at nighttime. And so when we find, and I say we, law enforcement, are on the street and we find someone that's asking for help, what you'll find is a lot of police officers, depending on the circumstances, will actually come out of pocket and actually pay for a person that says, hey, I need some help. They'll put them up in a hotel room. They'll get them some food. They'll get them whatever they need, but there's no one else I can call except for Department of Mental Health, unless they're a danger, self-danger to others or incapable of taking care of themselves, which is gravely disabled. That's the only resource I have for a person, 24 hours a day to get them help.
But you got to do something with those homeless people. They need help. They got to have help from somewhere. If you go in the street, feed one person a day or two person a day, that help them. Because some people need the food, they need drink, they need water, they need everything. They need the clothes, they need the shoes. And if somebody don't help them, how they gonna get it? And if they go steal in the store, you're gonna put them in jail. You're gonna have you know they need help. Why want somebody to help them? And that's what we do, help them people. As simple as that.
Every day I encounter people on the streets and everybody is different. Some people are more withdrawn because of their life situations prior to me encountering them, and it's hard for them to open up and trust or open up and listen to what I may have to offer them or to try and assist them with. How I basically build my rapport with them is by letting them know who I am, getting a feel for their comfort zone, if I'm able to, engage with them anymore, as far as being able to offer them services. If they're not, willing to hear anything I have to say, I just leave them my card, leave them my information, let them know what I'm all about, and that I'll just, do a follow-up with them. Let them know that I'll be coming around, and 99.9% of the time, unless there's an emergency going on, I always keep my word with that client because I want them to be able to trust not just myself, but my fellow co-workers in the organization that I'm a part of, because we're out here trying to help people.
A lot of homeless individuals that are out there have been almost lied to by other organizations, not so organizations, but they've been provided with false hope. It takes a little bit time sometimes to rebuild that rapport and let them know that there are organizations and there are people that care and that they do want to come out and they really want to help.
The hardest part of being in a homeless clinic would be getting them to come back, keeping in contact with them. Sometimes there's issues where we need to contact them immediately and we can't get a hold of them. There's a lot of mental illness out there.
I see a lot of things, a lot of connections between mental illness, drug addiction, and physical ailments. It's almost like when someone is disabled mentally, they use drugs to kind of help them to self-medicate or to, just deal with their everyday life. And there's a huge correlation between homelessness and physical and mental disabilities. People can't work, so they're not getting that paycheck and they can't provide for themselves, they can't buy their own food, they can't afford housing.
A lot of times there's a lot of trust issues with working with the homeless. They don't necessarily trust everybody.
It's very difficult to work with an individual that's living on the street because they're exposed to the elements. They may not be there. When you go back to follow up, there are situations where there is shelter beds available or housing available, and one of our staff have worked very hard, or one of our community-based organizations have worked very hard to obtain this opening, and just to find out that the person is gone and there's no way to find them. So it's much easier to work with someone that is stable, that is housed or in shelter, than it is to work with them while they're living on the street.
The solution to homelessness is permanent housing. Ultimately, that's the solution. You can do other things that help, getting people into shelter, getting people into transitional housing, but permanent housing, that place to live, that fixed address, is the best way in the long run to reduce the population of people experiencing homelessness.
I believe what we need to do is provide housing, shelter, because we have all these people that need help, but we don't have really places to provide for them. They're already filled to capacity. So we need more people coming on board, and maybe empty lots turning into housing.
One of the things that always astounds me is how our policymakers and elected officials really have no way of understanding that there's a very direct connection between evictions and homelessness. When people are evicted, they are being displaced. If they're being displaced into an unaffordable market, then they are likely to experience homelessness. Sadly, for most elected officials and for most service providers, it's a numbers game. So it is better to say we created a greater number of affordable units than a lesser number of affordable units. And so they would rather house a larger number of less poor people than a lower number of extremely poor people. We need for the subsidy to reach extremely low-income people. Those are the people that are on the streets right now. And so to the extent that housing is being built for people who are low and moderate income, we are missing the opportunity to house people who are extremely low income.
You know, I had the client I was talking to, and actually I just said goodbye to her when I said hello to you. She rented a U-Haul and kept it too long. And she kept it too long because she was trying to get through the winter and didn't think she'd survive unless she had that U-Haul to sleep in and to live in. And that resulted in an arrest. It resulted in her being brought into jail for 5 days, and then to get out of jail, which so often is the case, someone will just plead guilty or plead no contest because the deal is time served. But then they gave her 28 days of community labor, which is 28 8-hour days of hard labor, like working Caltrans on a freeway. And this is someone who, after talking to her today, has medical conditions. There's no way she could possibly ever accomplish that.
And we live in such a disposable society where, you know, you hear about tough love, and I think people are maybe sometimes going too far with that. And they're forgetting about the humanity. These are people. Every single one of us. And we get nowhere if we don't treat people with respect and dignity.
Well, the homeless population in the last homeless count, I believe, increased by 26%. A study is estimating that even a 5% increase in rent will result in a huge number of additional people ending up on the streets. You know that a problem is becoming acute when you see homeless people in areas where they usually are not. So we're all accustomed to seeing homeless people in and around Skid Row. Skid Row is so overpopulated that folks are spilling out to other communities.
Skid Row is 50 city blocks. In 50 city blocks, there's reported over 100 nonprofit organizations that are either in Skid Row or directly connected to Skid Row. So we're talking about a more than 2-to-1 ratio of nonprofit organizations to city blocks. And so if it's that many nonprofits, you know, in Skid Row, all you is like 2 per block. You would think, well, all the 2 nonprofits, just take care of your block and Skid Row will be fixed. The problem is what we call poverty pimping. So as long as the poverty is there, the nonprofits will continue to reap the benefits. Why? Because there's funding, not only from, we the people that donate, but also from, government agencies as well, that there's funding, and we talking the collective American tax-paying funding pot.
Anytime that you take a very complex issue and provide one approach, red flags go up for me. And so the approach being, well, we'll just house everybody, is really out of touch with what's actually happening out there. Mm-hmm. When we're looking at somebody with severe mental health issues, that number one, it took us 6 months to even get to a place where this person would talk to us. So you're developing trust. And another 1.5 years to get her into housing after she turned down housing time and time and time again. So for one person with mental health issues, it took 2 years to house them. Now, am I saying that that's the norm? It's not necessarily the norm, but to think that we can just go hand out keys to people and everything's going to be okay it's absurd in my mind. Now, do we need housing? We absolutely do need housing. But housing is not the solution for somebody with severe mental health issues. Housing isn't the solution for somebody with significant substance abuse issues. If that was the case, then anyone that had a home wouldn't be addicted.
So there are a number of different challenges. If we just start at the base level, understanding why people are homeless is probably one of the most important things that we can do. And to really understand that, there has to be lots of discussion. Lots of different community partners have to come to the table to have that discussion. A big part of the problem is dealing with mental health. I think that a larger part of the problem is mental health than is the economic equation. There's so many people who simply are sick, and so providing more housing doesn't necessarily solve the problem. Being able to provide housing along with the social service components and mental health services, I think is extremely important. But what we also are seeing is that oftentimes those programs are not run to an optimal level. And the challenge there is then that homeless persons won't go.
Every housing system has entry points. They have what they call the CES for the county, and the mental health has what they call gatekeepers. And those are the people that you have to contact to get youth into the housing programs. Well, it can be very difficult to get access to those systems. So if you have a homeless youth walk into your office that needs a place to stay that night, it's hard to be able to find any resources available. It could take you months to find them a bed. So a 19 or 20 or 21-year-old in a shelter with chronically homeless people is a serious issue. They're taken advantage of, they're beat up. There's a variety of things that go on that make it really difficult for that population to have a place to stay.
Oh my goodness. I'm not going to give you an accurate statistic offhand, but I want to say that the most current says something like within a couple of months of exiting care, more than 60% are homeless. And remember, homeless includes couch surfing, it includes being in a shelter, it includes just any kind of not stable housing situation that could be taken away from you at any given moment.
These times are different. I mean, I think that public housing or permanent supportive housing of the past, where there weren't many resources, was okay, we got them housed and we're done with you and we're walking away. But now the fact that Measure H allows us to be able to provide that continued case management for families that need it and make sure that, if the landlord is having issues or if there's something, they have a resource they can call.
We've seen a lot of progress with Prop H and HHH that passed. Where people have been starting to get together to talk about effective strategies that we can form. And that's where it all begins. While housing is a great long-term solution, we want to also focus on the immediate needs.
Let's talk through logic. Let's talk through really understanding just how communities work. And so people who are homeless still have community. In fact, they may have the strongest community they've ever had, where they feel accepted, they feel loved, they feel cared for. So to say, hey, we're asking you to give up your community so you can go live in this apartment by yourself is a significant undertaking.
We have to remember that, our homeless neighbors are, people, and they have rights and where they can go and where they want to be. And so, unless we start to find ways to acknowledge the fear that I think some people have in not wanting, the neighbors. I mean, they're there. I mean, they're a part of their communities now. People are concerned about, property values, but we've haven't found any research that shows that a public housing, development, will bring down property values. If not, it enhances it.
Right now, the kind of not in my backyard or community resistant to homeless services is a huge obstacle. But we look at it as a learning opportunity. Far too many people, when they imagine homelessness in the city of LA, they think immediately of Venice, Hollywood, in particular Skid Row. And they're afraid that adding any new services to their community is going to be like a magnet, and that it's going to grow, the encampments are going to grow, and it's going to create a sense of communities no longer being safe, particularly children walking to school, or people are concerned about car break-ins or increase in housing theft. What I think the public really doesn't understand is this regional housing system that we're developing with various connections. If you're suffering from substance abuse, you now have a portfolio of services that you can access, or mental health, or maybe you just really want housing before you deal with any of those, which is why we're building permanent supportive housing, because we know that once someone's housed, their ability to understand kind of what their addiction is or what their mental health illness is, they're more likely to understand it at a greater rate than when they're out on the street.
I don't know what their story is. I don't know what got them to where they are now. And for me, it's irrelevant. Where do you want to go from here?
What keeps us just being here and is just seeing one person, even if it's one person that is helped and their lives improved, that just keeps you going and says, okay, at least I made a difference in one person's life.
We're the richest nation in the world, and people are homeless next door to the Bank of America, Starbucks, and the contrast is too much to take. Ignore. It's something that we really need to do something about.
Love is like food and water. We need those things to sustain us and to balance us for good mental and social health. And when you feel worthless and devalued and treated in, society in ways that are totally inhumane, the general society, don't just give $1 and pat yourself on the back like it helped a homeless person. A hug would mean a whole lot more. We have to put a human touch on it. We have to not see that part of society as those people, them, they're us. They're us, and if they're homeless, it's reflecting on us. It reflects on us.